We are here with one of the famed intellects of our generation, Dr. Saad, author of multiple books, including national bestseller, The Parasitic Mind.
Professor at Concordia University, researcher, podcaster, and author of the new book, The Saad Truth About Happiness, 8 Secrets for Leading the Good Life.
The reason why I always speak out is because I wouldn't be able to fall asleep on that pillow if I thought I saw a murder of truth in the corner and I walked by ignoring it. I would be inauthentic. I am allergic to BS.
You've somehow or another avoided a full-scale cancellation.
Nothing sticks. They've tried to cancel me in all sorts of ways. If I didn't have the protection of tenure, I'd be gone long ago. After October 7th, it almost became impossible for me to go on campus. I very quickly noticed that some of the supposedly brightest people on earth can come up with some of the dumbest and most insane ideas. Neil deGrasse Tyson has an obligation. He's a public intellectual who has a large platform. If you're going to go and use your scientific imprimatur to say, it is settled, gender is on a spectrum, I'm coming after you. All of those parasitic ideas, postmodernism, cultural relativism, radical feminism, social constructivism, were all spawned on university campuses. Each of these idea pathogens starts off originally with a noble goal. Then in the service of that goal, if you have to destroy the edifices of reason, so be it.
This thing sang to me like a canary. Anytime I get into a debate moving forward, by the way, I'm just gonna be quoting you. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Mislaibeled. If you are watching this, and you could please like, subscribe, and comment, that would mean the world. Specifically, a subscription really, really helps the algorithm. We are working very, very hard. We right now are in Montreal, Canada. We are here with one of the famed intellects and evolutionary behavioral scientists of our generation, Dr. Saad. Some of his quick accomplishments include, first of all, he's a professor at the University of Concordia. He has his own podcast. Currently, he's the host of the Saad Truth.
Yes, sir.
Okay? He's a visiting professor and global ambassador at Northwood in Michigan.
That's right, Northwood
You
University.
like that? I remember that. I know you
Very
just told me
good.
that.
Look
That was
at
good. And he has his PhD in evolutionary behavioral science from Cornell University. Okay.
Slight correction, psychology of decision-making, but yes.
Psychology and decision-making.
Yeah.
By the way, I was never sure. What's the difference between evolutionary behavioral scientist and evolutionary psychologist?
It's a broader term. So evolutionary psychologist is a subset of all of the different ways by which you can use evolution to study human behavior. So evolutionary behavioral scientist might be an evolutionary anthropologist, it might be an evolutionary psychologist, it might be...
Got it.
So it's a broader term.
Understood. Okay. I'm, first of all, very, very excited to be here. Like, really, there are certain guests specifically that I really, really look forward to. As I told you before, and this is not the main thing that I do, but I always tell people that there are similarities between, podcasting and the real estate business, and kind of like the dopamine rush you get when you close a deal, and the dopamine rush you get when you close a great guest. So this was ranked high up.
But the dopamine rush of this one was greater though, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
No, like you're one of the guests.
This is like a $30 million
I did a $230 million deal, so you're above $230 million.
My goodness.
Sorry, I had to just throw that out there.
Thank you for feeding my ego.
Absolutely. Okay, fine. One of the coolest things is obviously that you're Jewish, especially with everything going on in Lebanon. You were born in Lebanon. Could you just talk a little bit to how, I know you speak about it a lot in your book. Yeah. I just want to mention, by the way, one other thing, probably the most important thing I forgot to mention in my intro was that Dr. Saad is a author of multiple books, including national bestseller, The Parasitic Mind. This book is gold. This thing sang to me like a canary.
Thank you.
I'm not even kidding. Like, you summed up everything that I've thought and just gave great explanations. Like, anytime I get into a debate moving forward, by the way, I'm just gonna be quoting you. I can't even wait.
That's great.
I'm gonna take all your years of work and just steal it and just start spitting facts. But yeah, could you just you talk about that?
So we were part of the last remaining group of Jews in Lebanon. Most of the Jewish community in Lebanon, which it was never a big one, but at one point it was several thousand Jews, had already left by the time we were there. Even most of my extended family had left, most to Israel, a few to France, one maternal aunt to Montreal. That's one of the reasons why we ended up moving to Montreal. But my parents were very well entrenched in Lebanese society. They were politically connected. They were successful business people. And so despite the fact that the writing was on the wall, it always takes that final push for people to wake up. And so I have 3 older siblings, much older than me. They had already all left Lebanon because it was
2 brothers and a sister.
2 brothers and sister, yes. You've done your homework. One is about 14 years older, one sister 12 years older, and then another brother 10 years older. And so there was really only me, still a kid, when the Civil War broke out in 1975. I was 10. And then when the war broke out, it became really impossible to be Jewish. And so eventually, during that first year of the Civil War, we got our act together and got out of there very quickly.
Were you only able to get out because of the political connections of your
I mean, in a sense, yes, because, and I tell this story in the book, the only way that we can actually escape is if we were driven to the airport by PLO militia. PLO is Palestinian Liberation Organization, is because a lot of the roadblocks that were set up around the Beirut International Airport were manned by PLO militia. Right. And so if you were not friendly to those militia, you weren't going to get through to make your flight. And so my parents, undoubtedly, I don't know the exact details, but I know that they paid some money to receive protection from these. I mean, imagine the images that you see from the safety of your Long Island house of ISIS and those guys. Well, those are the guys who picked us up.
It's amazing to me that they would even be willing to help you for, kind of any sum of money.
Well, they could have taken the money and they could have put a bullet in our head in a ditch, right? And I have often thought about that how the vagaries of life, right? If one of them had thought of being less than kind at that moment and not honor their deal, I wouldn't be sitting here next to you.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. So I'm sure you've answered the following question a million times, but just for the audience, I'm going to set some basic, understandings. So what is the study of a evolutionary behavioral scientist?
So imagine you want to study why humans have opposable thumbs, or why our respiratory system is the way that it is. You could apply evolutionary theory to study why it is that evolution would have endowed us with that ability.
Right.
Evolutionary psychology and evolutionary behavioral science is simply applying that to the study of the human mind. Why do we experience jealousy the way that we do? Why do we prefer the types of mates that we prefer? So you're applying the evolutionary lens to the most important organ in your body, which is your brain.
Got it. This book, The Parasitic Mind, obviously speaks a lot, regarding the woke agenda that's kind of progressivism that's really taken over Westernism over the last 10, 15 years. How would you say that evolutionary behavioral science or evolutionary psychology intersects specifically with this?
That's a great question. So the idea of using the neuroparasitological framework, which I'll explain in a second, came very much from the fact that as an evolutionary psychologist, I often will look at animal behavior in other species to make some statement about the human condition, right? So for example, if you want to study toy preferences and you want to show that little boys and little girls have certain innate toy preferences, you could study that behavior in other species to show that they exhibit the exact same toy preferences. And those studies have been done with rhesus monkeys, with vervet monkeys, with chimpanzees. They have the exact same toy preferences as human infants do. And so as I was trying to find a way to explain what is it that can cause people to be so ideologically captured, I started looking at the animal literature. So first I fell on the parasitology literature. Parasitology simply is the study of the interaction between a host and a parasite. So for example, a tapeworm can parasitize your intestinal tract. Mm-hmm. A neuroparasite has to find its way to your brain, altering your behavior to suit its interest. So for example, a wood cricket, an actual cricket, when it detests water, it abhors water, it wants nothing to do with water. When it is parasitized by a particular type of brainworm called a hairworm, the hairworm needs the wood cricket to jump in water in order for it to complete its reproductive cycle.
Right.
So it zombifies the wood cricket's brain, causing it to merrily jump and commit suicide in the service of the parasite. And so that was my epiphany.
Such a great analogy.
Thank
like
you.
what?
So I had that epiphany. I said, aha, well, I'm now going to argue in this book that human beings could be parasitized by actual brainworms. For example, Toxoplasma gondii is an actual brainworm. But human beings, regrettably, can be parasitized by ideological brainworms. I call these idea pathogens, and that's how the topic is.
What do you think the drive is in the Western world to argue with the reason on such a, basic foundation?
Yeah. So I try to actually explain why it is that these idea pathogens are so alluring. Why is it that people believe this nonsense? And maybe before I answer your question of why that is, it's worth maybe giving an example of a few parasitic ideas.
Please.
So, for example, postmodernism, I call it the granddaddy of all idea pathogens because it purports that there are no objective truths,
right,
other than the one objective truth that there are no objective truths, right? So up is down, left is right, women can have penises, freedom is slavery, war is peace, men can have kids, men can menstruate. Yeah. So it affords the epistemological liberty for anything to be possible, okay? So that would be one example of an idea pathogen, okay? And so what I wanted to do in the book was argue, so why do people get parasitized this way? And what I propose is that each of these idea pathogens starts off originally with a noble goal, noble objective, which then in the service of that goal, if you have to destroy the edifices of reason, so be it. So let me give you a concrete example. Equity feminism is a good idea. It basically says that men and women should be treated equally under the law. And based on that definition, most of us would say, yeah, sign me up, I'm an equity feminist. Radical feminists argue if we wish to eradicate toxic masculinity and the patriarchy and so on, we need to argue that men and women are indistinguishable from each other, that there are no biological based differences between men and women, because that will allow us to fight sexism and misogyny more easily.
Right.
So in the service of what started off as a noble pursuit, if we murder and rape truth, so be it. And so I argue that each of these parasitic ideas starts off that way. Noble goal, which then metamorphosizes into nonsense, once it evolves into a parasite.
So effectively, the people that are starting it start off, with a noble goal, and then there are people that take it to just a further extreme,
exactly,
that just allow their feelings effectively to control the outcome of what they want.
Exactly. So I'll give you one other example.
Please.
So cultural relativism is another idea pathogen, which argues that there are no human universals. There's not a single thing that is common to all humans. Every culture has to be judged according to its own idiosyncratic trajectory. Right. That theory, by the way, was originally developed about 100 years ago by a Jewish cultural anthropologist by the name of Franz Boas from Columbia University. Now, why did they originally propose such nonsense? Because, there are human universals. It's as obvious. A 3-day-old pigeon would know that, right? For example, if I do this frown, there is no culture where this means that I'm happy. Yeah. And if I smile, there is no culture where people don't understand that that's a positive affective state, right? But they wanted to argue that, no, everything is socially constructed. Why did they do that? Well, because they thought, these cultural anthropologists thought, that in the wrong hands, the use of biology can result in terrible consequences. So, for example, British class elitists argued something that they called social Darwinism. They argued, look, we're the upper class, and if the lower class, they die in their squalor and from tuberculosis, hey, who cares? That's just natural selection. It's just evolution taking its place. The Nazis came along, said, hey, there's a natural struggle between races, and we are the Aryan race. We won. So if we eliminate the Jews and the gypsies and the homosexuals, hey, that's just natural selection. That's just evolution, which of course it wasn't. But they were misusing evolutionary theory. They were misusing biology to advance their political goals. So these anthropologists came along and said, well, what if we erect edifices of lack of reason that could hopefully protect us against these misuses of biology? But that's ridiculous, because that's like arguing, well, let's not study physics properly because it could result in weapons being developed, right? So you can't murder truth in the service of a goal. That's why I argue sorry for the mouthful, that the pursuit of truth is a deontological principle.
So it's perfect. That actually leads me exactly to what I wanted to ask. So you talk about in the second chapter about the deontological principle versus the consequential principle.
Yes.
Okay, and you talk about how there are certain times, in fairness, I'll just be honest, you actually didn't spell it out very clearly. You didn't spell it out very clearly when consequentialist should be used in the book. It kind of seemed that you felt in the book, I believe it's like page 30-ish around, that it shouldn't be there. There's never a time for a consequentialist. And then I watched a podcast where you actually explained that no, there are times.
Yes.
So when are the times, just to clarify, where a consequentialist ethos should be used?
So actually, this is an example that I did give in the book. I recently celebrated 25 years with my wife. Okay, so here is a life tip. If your spouse asks you, what?
You did write this, I know.
Yeah. If your wife asks you, do I look fat in those jeans? Put on your consequentialist hat and say, absolutely not. In this case, you are potentially lying, but you're lying to protect the feelings of someone you love. So there are many, many cases in life, most cases, where there are reasonable ethical arguments to be made that you could put on a consequentialist hat. But there is a set of principles that by definition have to be deontological. So for example, the pursuit of truth has to be deontological. Right. It can't be follow truth, but. Once you put but, so for example, if we find that, since we're both of the same tribe, if we find tomorrow that Orthodox Jews are more likely to commit a certain type of crime, for whatever reason, should we not...
Tax embezzlement?
You're succumbing to Jewish stereotypes.
Okay, go.
But let's suppose that there, whatever it was, right? And I wanted to study that. What are there cultural reasons? Are there genetic reasons why Orthodox Jews are much more likely than anyone else to commit such a crime? Well, if I were a consequentialist, I would say, don't publish that, because then that might marginalize Orthodox Jews.
Right.
That might be viewed as anti-Semitic. If I'm a deontological bent in pursuing truth, then I say it doesn't matter whether Orthodox Jews their feelings will be hurt by that. It's part of the pursuit of truth, right? So that would be one example. Let me give you one or two others. Freedom of speech has to be deontological. Once you say, I believe in freedom of speech, but that means you don't believe that it's a deontological principle. Now, there are asterisks that are associated with freedom of speech. You can't defame me. You can't engage in direct incitement to violence, right? So, for example, you could say Judaism is a crock of nonsense. It's pure BS. Mm-hmm. And you should be allowed to say that. On the other hand, if you say, at the corner of Notre Dame and 7th Street, when the Jews come out of the synagogue, let's go and kill them, right. That's not protected by freedom of speech, by the First Amendment in the U.S. So for most things, it has to be deontological. So that's what I talk about in the book.
So my only question is, obviously that for sure makes sense. And I love the fact that truth and freedom is your motto of like defending those things. And that's what drives you, in authenticity, right? I think we have to add authenticity into the word, one of those words, because you write truth and freedom in the beginning of the book. But in
the next book, in the happiness book, I talk about authenticity a lot more.
Okay. In fairness, I'll be honest, I didn't manage to cover the happiness book, even though we're going to get to some of those principles I know you discussed there. All right, everybody, I want to take a quick second to give a big shout out to our sponsor for this episode, CubX. CubX is, as far as I'm concerned, the #1 IT provider for businesses, whether that be big or small, real estate, healthcare, finance, e-commerce, apparel. It does not matter. These guys have it on lock. I know this because I personally use them, and I've referred these guys to probably 10 different friends of mine who are all running both small or large businesses, and they've all come back to me and have given me rave reviews about these guys and thanked me profusely for sending them their way. So if you want to get ahead and focus on the things that make you money and not be busy for hours when a tech issue comes up, give these guys a call. They have changed the game, and most importantly, have changed the IT experience for those who use them. Their customer support is off the charts. I can personally attest to this. One ring, they pick up, and you're dealing with an experienced tech who knows what's up. Feel free to test it. If you're starting a new company or are unhappy with your current IT provider and are looking for the best product out there, take it from me. This is a no-brainer choice. Give these guys a call. You can reach them at 732-444-8771 and choose sales when following the prompts. Or you can reach out via email at hello at cubx.com. That's HELLO at CUBX.com. You can also check them out at cubx.com. That's CUBX.com. Now back to our episode. Specifically regarding hate speech versus, free speech. Obviously, you said there's an asterisk by hate speech. How do we determine? I feel like a lot of people have differences of opinion on what is hate speech and what is free speech.
Anything short of a very direct incitement to violence is okay.
We have to err on the side of caution.
On the side of freedom.
Yeah.
Okay, on freedom of speech. Exactly.
It's so difficult because you'll have the consequentialists or the postmodernists who will, sit there and say that, saying that Judaism is, a crock of nonsense. They'll say that is hate speech. I mean, we have that.
I don't though. So I'll give you the word. I'll give you the most offensive speech that is imaginable, and maybe you've heard me mention this example before. There is nothing worse than to deny a historical reality whereby an entire people was being exterminated at industrial scale level, called the Holocaust. So there's nothing more offensive than for someone to stand up at a university and say it never happened. Actually, it wasn't 6 million Jews; it was 6 Jews. It's just the Jews like to lie. That's very offensive. That's very hurtful, right? But in a free society, I have to tolerate racists, bigots, falsehood spreaders, idiots, imbeciles. That's what freedom of speech is meant to protect. It's not meant to protect that you tell me I look really good in my velvet suit, right? Because then you don't need freedom of speech for that, right? I'd happily.
For sure.
So, and I think most people don't have that reflex because most people want to be kind, decent, empathetic people, which is the topic of my next book, Suicidal Empathy.
Yeah.
And therefore, in the service of being infinitely empathetic, if we murder these foundational principles, so be it. At least I could die being an empathetic person.
Right. But it's I mean, nice guys finish last. There's really a piece to that I was, by the way, everyone, you should follow Dr. Saad's Twitter of the greatest feeds to date. And the most amazing thing you should know that I realize is that there are people who don't pick up on your satire.
You want to hear something?
Because that's how crazy the world is.
And you want to hear something? Someone once wrote one of the most profound tweets from someone that I've ever seen. He said, Dr. Saad has found the singularity point. They could never cancel him because they never know when he's being straight and when he's being satirical. By the way, that's exactly the power of satire. That's why dictators, when they want to get rid of the most dangerous people in their society, they don't go after the guys with the big muscles because those are very easy to kill. They go after the guys with the sharp tongues, the guys with the spicy pen, because it is those guys that have the true intellectual muscle. It's the satirist who can bring me down. It's not the guy who is tall and has big muscles. One arrow and I get rid of him.
Yeah.
But ideas are a lot more dangerous, and therefore usually the first thing that the dictators will get rid of is humor, satire, mockery, because I can't stand that. So think about some religions today that are very intolerant of comedy or satire. Can you think of anyone?
I could think of some.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so there is when there's the Book of Mormons that becomes a best-selling play, where one could argue the play is not very complimentary to Mormons. There were no terrorist attacks, right? You can do all sorts of blasphemous thing to Christianity under the auspices of its art, right? You can take literally a crucifix of Christ. I don't know if you know this example. And this artist put it in a jar of urine and called it art, and yet no Catholics went around killing people. Yeah. But there is one particular religion,
not talking about Judaism, right?
Right, where you can't do that, precisely because that religion recognizes that once you open it up to mockery, then it's on shaky grounds. And so satire is very powerful.
How have you, I was going to ask this towards the end, but hell with it.
Sure.
How have you been able to fight? You don't mince words when it comes to Islam. You don't, at all, and in an amazing way, the way it should be done. How do you have, that courage, and how are you still standing, if I'm being honest?
Well, God willing, for many, many more years.
I mean, standing, also the question's in a physical way, but I wasn't referring to it in a literal way. I was also figuratively, like...
Yeah, like being canceled.
Yeah, you haven't gotten... I mean, you're still a professor of marketing in Concordia. And they're also very left-leaning
Probably the most left-leaning.
How is this happening?
So I think there are a couple of reasons why that's taking place. One is because I'm very, very disciplined in my what I call epistemological humility. And so let me explain what I mean by that. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. So you could ask me right here 1,000 questions. I won't try to wing it if I don't know, right? Because I don't pretend to be the professor who knows everything. There's a million questions you can ask me. I'm like, oh, that's a great question. Unfortunately, I really don't know enough about this to tell. And by the way, that builds trust.
Yeah.
Because when the audience, say my undergraduate students, see they come in to first day of class, wow, I'm in Saad's class, and then they ask me some great question. I go, you know what? Send me an email. I'm going to look into it. Then they know that I'm never going to BS them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So how is this related to the question of canceling that you're talking about? If I take a position on Islam, I could back it up with a tsunami of evidence. So good luck to you if you want to debate me, because I've already done my homework.
For sure. No one's going to argue that you're wrong, but from the consequentialist line of thinking, they could just get rid of you and cancel you. It's,
They can, but that's the beauty of tenure. So for the people who, there is some truth to the argument that tenure, which for those of you who don't know is the protective mechanism that causes professors not to be able to be fired for things that they say. Some will argue, but that creates deadwood. After people get tenure, they don't have any reason to keep producing and being productive.
Right.
The reality is most professors will keep producing no matter what, because they are driven to pursue science and so on. But someone like me, if I didn't have tenure, I would have been canceled 25 years ago. This is my 31st year as a professor, and I've never modulated my speech. I've always told it like it is, and I would have never gotten as far as I did if it weren't for tenure.
Do you have sympathy for the people that, are careful about what they say who don't have tenure?
No.
So why is that?
I'll tell you why. So here is an email that I've received from 50,000 people. You ready? Dear Professor Saad, a bunch of compliments, and here's the last sentence.
Anonymous.
In case you decide that you want to read this email on your show, please do not mention my name. And then I respond and I say, dear so-and-so, thank you very much for your kind words. Don't you think that the last sentence is exactly why we are in the position that we're in? And then oftentimes that will kind of slap them into reality. Now, it seems as though I'm being sort of smug about it, or I'm not taking their concerns seriously. There's always a reason why it shouldn't be you who speaks out. I can't speak out because I'm only a postdoc. I can't speak out because I don't have tenure yet. I can't speak out. I have tenure, but I'm applying for full professor. I can't speak out. I do have full professor, but I'm applying for chair professor. Right. I can't speak out because I won't get the grant. I can't speak out because I'm in the running for the Nobel Prize, and if I speak out. So there's always a reason that I can find for why it shouldn't be me who speaks out. You know who didn't care about that? The thousands of men who lined up, put up their hand in Normandy and said, we will land on Normandy where we're going to be mowed down like little mosquitoes by Nazi machine guns. They seem to have lost a lot more than your reputation or not being accepted to the cool parties in Manhattan or not getting tenure, and yet they did it. So I don't mean to be flippant or smug about everybody's concern. Of course, don't be a reckless martyr, right? You can modulate how you take your risks.
Right.
But the idea that you are unique in the risks you face is not true, right? One of the reasons why I never show my family in any photos is precisely because I incur a lot of costs that have nothing to do with tenure, right? So when someone says, here are the 17 ways we're going to kill you, that's not a pleasant email to receive. But I can't not speak because I know what happens to societies where you can't speak. I come from those societies, and I don't want the West to repeat those mistakes.
It's interesting because I was going to say when I started this, first of all, this might be, or I might have caught you on potentially the best day of your life. I mean, with Trudeau.
Oh,
if he drops right now, in my mind, I was like, I should bring that up first, but we got started.
Yes.
I mean, I'm hoping that
Trudeau. But can I tell you something? It's going to surprise you. Even if he were to step down today, it wouldn't remove the existential injury that I feel that no matter what, he was prime minister for 9 years. The fact that degenerate, lobotomized cretin who, by the way, every single parasitic idea in my book, he is a walking manifestation of it, right? He doesn't say recession, he says secession, because he's a feminist guy.
He's
I mean, he's a caricature, right?
Yeah,
he pursues a feminist foreign policy, right? He believes in, his cabinet has to have the right number of transgender people and, women with penises and so on. So, by the way, I can't apply for grants as a scientist if I don't fill out a diversity, inclusion, equity statement. So now it's been about 7 years since I've last had a research grant because I'm unwilling to play that charade, right? You would never know if I filled it out, right? It could be completely anonymous, right? But I wouldn't feel authentic if from this side of my mouth, I'm arguing against how ridiculous it is to fill out these forms. But then when nobody is looking because I need money, I play along. And therefore, I've been completely without any research funds for 7 years because of your boyfriend, Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, no, he's on a whole different level, that guy. Talking about that, in America, especially with the, Trump's win, which I think you'd be proud of me. I put down a big bet on Trump winning the popular vote.
Look at you.
And I made a whole bunch of money.
Wow.
So that was really nice.
I was following, what is that betting site that became famous?
So there's Kalshi and there's Poly.
That's the one. I was looking at it feverishly the day of the thing, and as it was going up.
So I'll tell you, part of what I realized, I was just straight. I was getting it with 1 to 4 odds. So already on the popular vote it was 1 to 4 odds, and on the most left-leaning outlets only had her up 1% on the popular vote.
Right.
And just in general, when there's any poll, I just did +3 Trump, just like and the most accurate polls of the last 3 elections had Trump winning by 2 points. I just felt based on independence, there was a whole host of reasons actually, and I announced this publicly before. I really put my money where my mouth is. Right. I announced it publicly before. I said, I guarantee this is happening, and I put down, money on it. I wrote it on Twitter, whatever, the whole 9 yards. Anyways, what made sense, the reason what just was simple and straightforward in this case was that at the very least, it should have been a 50-50 line. It was 22-78.
Yeah.
So I knew that it was at least going to go up to 50-50 just on a given, because it's not going to be 22-78, So anyways, that was but obviously with the Trump win, getting back to what I was saying, the Trump win has changed things.
Yes.
Dramatically, or at least we're headed in a much better direction. I honestly don't even want to think about what would have happened if she would have won. It was that bad of a candidate. My question specifically is, how can you reverse what is happening? And the reason why I asked that, just to elaborate a little bit, further, is that this is an indoctrination, right? It's a pathogen that's, a parasitic pathogen, as discussed, that's taken over the mind. It's also coming from universities. It's being indoctrinated into kids in universities, and that's your biggest.
Even younger,
great. Yeah. Okay, true. And my question is, how do you? There's a clear, stark contrast in the country. Yeah, Trump won. That was 50% of the country, but the other 50% undoubtedly still hold the same parasitic.
That's why, by the way, so to your question, this is why I implore people to not become complacent in the battle against all of these parasitic ideas. Because a lot of people have gotten that reflex. Now that Trump and his gang has come in, that's it, the nightmare is over. I mean, yes, he's going to create a bit of an autocorrection, but it took 50 to 100 years for many of these parasitic ideas to originally flourish in the academic ecosystem and then, to be promulgated everywhere in society. Hopefully, it won't take 50 to 100 years to eradicate all the parasitic ideas, but it won't all end magically by the time of, Trump's stepping down from his second term. It's going to be a much longer battle. To your point, it's an ideological/cultural battle. And so for me, for example, for my next book, when I was thinking about, which of the two wins, if Kamala wins or if Trump wins would be better for my book. Now, in a small way, you would argue, well, if Kamala had won, of course, it would be a disaster, but it would be even better for my book because it would just accelerate all the nonsense. But the reality is, even if Trump won, which he did, it's not. These things are not going to go away overnight. It's still going to be a generational battle. So
what's the reason to believe it will ever go away? Is it just because the same way it got here, we could assume it'll just pass on?
Well, listen. Let me give you an example. There used to be a time in Salem, Massachusetts, where it was thought to be a good idea to throw women, if you thought that they were witches, into water. And if they swim and don't drown, then this proves that they are witches. But if they drown, oops, I guess they weren't witches. And many, many people thought that that was a great idea. Well, today, several hundred years later, we no longer think that. So the human mind has always had the capacity to be parasitized. It's not, because people ask me, is what you write in the parasitic mind, is it related to the current time? It's yes and no. It's no in the sense that throughout human history, we've been parasitized. What is unique to the current period are the specific idea pathogens that are parasitizing us. While we don't worry about Salem witch hunts, we do think that men can menstruate, right? So the parasitic ideas take new forms, but our capacity to be parasitized is eternal.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Like,
there you go.
If you go backwards.
That's why I wear the velvet suit.
I love it. All right, everybody, want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for this episode, Isak Clothing, quick wardrobe change, and I could never be happier. I started wearing their stuff recently. They are a business casual line offering style, comfort, and luxury. They have a fantastic selection of suits, blazers, and polos. Some of their signature products are Supima cotton shirts, which are super comfortable and offer a soft four-way stretch, breathable material, and offer amazing comfort. Pricing is affordable, ensuring you're not getting garbage, but also that you're not breaking the bank and you're getting great bang for your buck. Customer service, fantastic. That's the biggest thing for me. I use them. They're great. If you want to upgrade your clothing game, make sure to check these guys out. You can find them at isaknewyork.com. That's ISAKNY.com. I got you guys a great discount as well. Spend $100, get 20% off. You can enter a promo code upon checkout, Mislaibeled. That's Mislaibeled with an I, and you will be able to get that discount. So again, to check these guys out, go to isakny.com. That's ISAKNY.com. These guys are the new up-and-comers. Their stuff is fantastic. I've been wearing it lately. Super comfortable, affordable. You will not be disappointed. Now, back to our episode. There's something very interesting that I wanted to ask you. Of course, part of the parasitic syndrome is this idea that everyone is racist, bigoted, etc., no matter what the facts, show,
right.
Profiled, you name it, all those things. We have a current situation going on. I do want to talk a little bit more about the parasitic mind and the book, but there's one thing I really wanted to get to. We do have something going on right now, especially with Israel and Jewish people. We're very, very much in the spotlight right now. And the same way, me and you would, really hate, and I presume we're on the same page about this, of saying something and then being called a racist immediately. There seems to be a common sentiment from, a lot of times it's anti-Semites actually, but sometimes it's not, that they feel that any single time there's any criticism towards Israel, the word "you're an anti-Semite" is thrown out, and that there's no ability for them to have an opinion on the Jews or Israel, because if there is, they're just immediately character assassinated. Do you think there's validity to that? And if so, what would be
I think you could absolutely criticize specific Israeli policies, just like you can criticize Cameroonian policies and you wouldn't be called racist, or you can criticize Japanese policies without being called an anti-Japanese bigot.
Yeah.
So there is absolutely room for people, reasonable people, to say, this particular policy by the Israeli government is wrong for reasons X, Y, Z. The reality, though, is that most people who, quote, attack Israeli policies or Zionism but not Jews, if I scratch a bit, they usually are anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
But in the abstract, is it possible to criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic? 100% yes.
Do you think we're doing ourselves a disservice at all by just throwing out the word very flippantly?
Of anti-Semite?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I would say, on Twitter. Twitter's a real cesspool,
right.
Freedom of speech, obviously. But at the end of the day, it is the cool thing.
Again, it's a case-by-case basis, right? I think that there are some Jews that are so thin-skinned, or maybe they're Israelis, who fall prey to what you're saying, which is any valid criticism of Israel becomes a form of anti-Semitism, and they do us a disservice because then people say, you know what, here comes the Jew crying anti-Semitism.
Right.
But if you see the kind of stuff that I receive, I'm not Israeli. I'm not involved with the IDF. I didn't shoot anybody. But if you see the orgiastic hate that I receive, that's not anti-Zionism, that's anti-Jew.
Honestly, I don't even, not that I don't care to, but I don't even need to see that. If you go on Twitter, on X right now, I don't think, X formerly known as Twitter, which I think the formerly known as Twitter will always be there, right? If you go there, I mean, like you said, I love that word, the orgiastic flood of anti-Semitism, like direct, clear. There is no from, say, likes like Dan Bilzerian. And, what are your thoughts, let's say, on Candace Owens? Do you think
it's funny? I just put up a post about her today where I was satirically.
Yes, I saw the post.
You saw the post,
yes.
right?
But I want to hear. Meaning, I want to hear your full.
So
thoughts.
look, I don't know what happened to her. She became parasitized by some strain of anti-Jew, hatred.
Yeah.
Because I know Candace. She came on my show, and at the time, so this is probably 4 or 5 years ago. She was very reasonable. She was kind of she took up the place of the conservative, pretty black girl, right? So she's not, she was demonstrating that you can't presume that if someone is of a particular group, everybody follows suit. Not all Jews vote Democrats. Some actually love Trump.
Right.
And so she was representing that. Not all black Americans are, Democrats and so on. And so she held a particular, appealing niche, and then I don't know what happened to her. She went wild.
Something went bonkers there. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. And frankly, not that I wish to get personal on this, but I'd like to think that I'm very adept at picking up certain character flaws in people. So here's a character flaw that I picked up in her that has nothing to do with her anti-Jew stuff. I mean, literally, probably within a day or two of Kanye West tweeting something like, "I like how you think, Candace," that so got to her head that the next day she unfollowed every single person that she had been following. So she went from being a fangirl of, let's say, Jordan Peterson or Gad Saad to suddenly no longer needing to be associated with us because she had transcended to the real intellectual and the real, cerebral powerhouse of Kanye. Somebody who can let go of, right? I mean, I literally have people that I had followed back 8-10 years ago on Twitter that I can't stand the positions that they take, but I've never unfollowed them out of just a sign of respect that they, right? Well, but Candace, after the Kanye thing, decided that she was too good for the rest of us. And so that to me suggests that she didn't process her growing fame really well. And so never mind the anti-Jew stuff.
Yeah. Let me ask you, I wanted to just go back a little bit to the ostrich parasitic syndrome. Yes. For a simpleton like myself.
Yes.
And everyone else in the world that doesn't have, honestly, your intellect. Sorry, not trying to gas you up, just being honest. How do you differentiate between, doctrines that will lead you towards that versus the truth?
Right. So just for people to explain the syndrome, so this is a metaphor. The ostrich doesn't actually do this, but burying your head in the sand has become the metaphor for ignoring reality, right? So, or doing la la la, that's the same thing. Now, ostrich parasitic syndrome is a malady that I coined that suggests that it doesn't matter how much evidence I can show you, I can never get you to change your position on something honestly. So, example, earlier we spoke about Islam, and I have a whole section on this in the Parasitic Mind. So, since 9/11, there have been over 45,000 terror attacks committed by Islamic terrorists in nearly 70 countries since 9/11 alone.
Unbelievable.
They will go up in front of a television, and then this will be publicly, advertised, aired, that we are about to do the thing that we're about to do, and they quote the exact verses from the Quran that justifies why they should do it. Here is what in French you say les bien-pensants, the good, the politically correct thinkers will have us believe. You ready? That's going to be ostrich parasitic syndrome. It's lack of art exposure that causes Muhammad to go and blow people up in Brussels, because the reality is who amongst us, if it weren't for being exposed to Picasso, we would head off to Raqqa in Syria and throw the gays off the rooftops? It's a straight, direct line from me not seeing Chagall and Picasso and becoming a jihadist, right? But this is not said satirically, but because at all costs, I have to protect the noble faith from Islamophobia, right? Bill Nye, the science guy,
that was wild,
explained to all of us simpletons that the Bataclan terror attack in Paris was due to
climate change.
Yeah. Because those guys in Syria said, you know what, there's just too much carbon emissions, not enough solar panels. We're really raping Mother Earth. It's time to go to Paris and kill the kuffar. Right? So when you're able to generate such nonsense with a straight face, because nothing is more important than to be empathetic to the noble faith, that's ostrich parasitic syndrome. So how do you know what's right or wrong? Believe your lying eyes.
The information can be confusing. There's so much, what tactics, if you're someone who's growing up, let's say under the age of 30, you're formulating your thoughts. I mean, you could have people, you get so much information, some of it, even though maybe in your gut seems like it doesn't feel right? And your instinct feels like, no, this is off, but then it's sold to you in in a package that like, oh, I can't really argue with this. It makes sense.
So one of the things that I've learned in my many years of public engagement and academic debates and so on is to know when I should no longer waste time on you, because I know that no amount of evidence that I could ever present you will ever get you to... By the way, that's one of the reasons why I refuse to debate many people, even in very, very prestigious forums, because I know that person, because I know their history, is never going to come to a debate with an honest spirit, where they're at least open to the idea of changing their minds. By the way, I was recently asked on a show, it was hosted by a British psychiatrist. This was about a year ago. Oh. He asked me, and funnily enough, I don't think anyone has ever asked me that question on any other show. At the end of the show, he said, of all your years as a behavioral scientist, as a psychologist and so on, what is the singular phenomenon that has most surprised you about humans? And so I had to think for a second. I said, probably the inability of most people to ever change their opinions on anything. So in chapter 7 of The Parasitic Mind, which is a chapter where I'm talking about how to seek truth,
yes,
I start off at first where I give a whole bunch of quotes by very well-known psychologists, including Leon Festinger, who is the pioneer of cognitive dissonance theory, where he basically gives the very pessimistic view that almost no person, irrespective of how much evidence you give them, are you ever able to get them to move away from their anchored position.
So,
but that notwithstanding, I think I did offer what I call a mind vaccine, which I can share with you if you'd like.
Please.
But it's a slightly technical, so can we take like 5 or 10 minutes to explain it, or we're going to time? Yeah, okay.
I mean, I'm ready to go for as long. I know you have the...
Yeah, I have other... No problem.
I have a bunch to get to, but yeah, sure.
So,
go ahead, please.
So I think we mentioned it off air when I was testing you on how well you had read the book.
Did I pass or not?
You did. You did, 100%. So nomological networks of cumulative evidence is a mind vaccine for seeking truth. So it's a mouthful, so let me try to explain what that means. Let's suppose earlier I mentioned very briefly toy preferences. Let's suppose I wanted to prove to you. So let's say you are a social constructivist. Social constructivist means you believe that nothing's due to biology, everything is due to social construction. So when it comes to toy preferences, you would say the reason why little boys are much more likely to play with guns and balls and hammers, whereas little girls are more likely to play with dolls, is because they are nurtured into those toy preferences. So let's suppose I wanted to demonstrate that that's a false position, that there are biological evolutionary reasons why these sex-specific toy preferences exist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build you a nomological network of cumulative evidence that hopefully drowns you in the tsunami of evidence that's going to come your way. So what am I going to do? And I'll give examples in a second. I'm going to show you that across cultures, those toy preferences exist across very, very different cultures. I'm going to show you that across time periods, those preferences have been exactly the same. I'm going to show you that across species, those preferences are the same. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to triangulate. I'm going to bring distinct line of evidence from a bewildering number of sources so that hopefully it becomes unassailable and unequivocal that the position I hold is the correct one. Now, the good news is that when I have done that with many people, I have been able to flip many people.
Really?
And that speaks actually to your earlier question of why I don't get canceled. Because I walk into rooms where there are hundreds of people who are unbelievably hostile. Then I present my evidence and I go, how come I'm not hearing any rebuttals?
That chirping slows down quickly. Yeah.
Be quiet and sit down, right? Well, that's because I've done my homework, because I've already triangulated all the possible. And let me give you examples of those specific lines of evidence for toy preferences, okay? So for example, I can get you data from pediatric endocrinology, where this is in medicine, pediatrics, where little girls who suffer from a disorder called congenital adrenal hyperplasia. It's a disorder that masculinizes their morphology. It masculinizes their behaviors. So little girls who suffer from this endocrinological disorder, guess what their toy preferences look like? They look like those of little boys. So that demonstrates that there is an endocrinological hormonal reason for those preferences.
Interesting.
I can get you data from 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, in Roman times, where in funerary monuments and mausoleums, little boys and little girls are depicted playing with the exact same toys as they are today. I can take you to cultures that have nothing to do with the West, sub-Saharan nomadic tribes in Africa, where they play with the exact same types of toys. I can bring you other animals like rhesus monkeys and rivet monkeys and show you. So look what I'm doing. I am cornering you. I am putting the epistemological noose, metaphorically speaking, around your neck so that hopefully you will kind of throw up your arms and go, all right, I'm convinced.
Interesting.
And so I'm able to do that. Now, there are, for some people, no way for me to do that because they literally are going, la, la, la.
Yeah.
So how can I give you the vaccine against polio if you never show up to the station to take the vaccine, right? But for many people, as long as they're intellectually honest to at least hear my evidence, I can flip you.
What would be the response, let's just say, as I was listening to this, that, okay, you're arguing there's a biological, reason, let's say, for this, and, social constructivists will obviously say that's a social component. What would be the answer if one of them said, well, yeah, it's in our biology because originally, let's say millions of years ago, or whenever you believe the world was created, when the world started, really, it was a social component. Now, it became a biological one because socially they kept on doing it. So
It's
now,
actually the exact opposite. That's very. It's
how do you know? Maybe they'd argue that now, if everyone, if we could change our biology, so the same way evolution has created a biology, right? We got here, we could unevolutionize it.
Well, so there are many ways that we could know, but let me just answer it in a broad way. So, when my students ask me about nature versus nurture, which very much relates to what you're saying, biology versus social construction. Biology is nature, social construction is nurture. How do we know the difference? Well, first of all, nurture exists in its form because of biology, not in lieu of biology. So for example, there is no culture where girls are taught to engage in indiscriminate sex with as many men as possible. It doesn't exist.
Right.
The reason why, it hasn't existed is because men and women have differing costs in making a poor mate choice. And that exists 18,000 years ago, and it will exist 18,000 years from now, and it exists in the Yanomamo tribe in Amazon, and it exists here in Montreal. These are biological realities. Therefore, socialization builds on those biological imperatives. So religion teaches women to be chaste, irrespective of which religion, right? Orthodox Jews teach their women to be chaste, and Catholic girls are taught to be chaste, and Muslim girls are taught to be chaste, if we only speak about Abrahamic faiths, right? So nurture exists because of biology, but let me give you one other important metaphor. This is called the cake metaphor. If I am baking a cake, before I start baking the cake, bear with me, I'm going to come. Yeah. Each of the ingredients are separate, right? Here are the eggs, here's the butter, here's the flour, here's the sugar. Once I bake the cake and it becomes an inextricable mix, if I told you, please point to the eggs, you wouldn't be able to. That's exactly nature nurture. We are an inextricable mélange of our genes and our environment, but nothing in our nurture exists outside of our biology. It exists because of biology. This is what Matt Ridley, the famous evolutionary biologist, said, nurture by nature. Right?
Got it.
Or E.O. Wilson, who recently passed away, he was a Harvard biologist, said that biology holds culture on a leash. The leash could be long, meaning that different cultural traditions can manifest themselves in different ways, but no culture could ever exist that violates biological imperatives.
Yeah, you're saying there's a foundation across certain things that they can't be fought. How would you say that the upcoming book, Suicidal Empathy, is going to differ from The Parasitic Mind?
Yes, great question. So The Parasitic Mind is a narration of what happens to our cognitive system when it is parasitized. So human beings are both a thinking and a feeling animal, right? It's not one or the other, right? So we've evolved a cognitive system, and we've also evolved an emotional system. So I can tell you the reasons why men and women have evolved romantic jealousy, for example. There's an evolutionary biological reason why that, a toxic response exists. Okay, and we can talk about it if you like. So in Parasitic Mind, I'm talking about what happens to human brains, their cognition, when it is parasitized by idea pathogens. I complete the story with Suicidal Empathy by now explaining what happens to your emotional system when it is hijacked by idea parasites.
It's very, very interesting. I mean, I know, the Suicidal Empathy, the words speak for itself.
Exactly.
I mean, we have people, the most basic things. It's unbelievable.
By the way, just
crazy.
Forgive me for interrupting you. I can't believe how viral it's gone. It almost has me worried that it's gone viral too early before the book comes out. Because crazy. Now I could literally go on social media and I will see Suicidal Empathy in like 60 languages. It's in the Philippines, it's in Germany, it's in France.
When is it coming out?
So officially in 2026. But I'm trying to but if guys like you keep inviting me on these shows, I can't be writing the book, you see. No, but seriously, I'm trying to speed it up. One of the reasons why, frankly, I'm very excited this year to be at Northwood University, and I'm not saying this to plug them, is because they've really given me the freedom. They haven't tied me down with a million other responsibilities, and so I'm able to accelerate the pace at which I'm writing the book.
It's fascinating. I mean, the words speak for themselves. It's at the end of the day, I mean, you could explain it to people just on a very simple level, the concept of suicidal empathy.
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So empathy is a perfectly noble and rational emotion to hold, right? I mean, we are a social species. Therefore, we have to manage these relationships. One of the ways that we manage these relationships is through the mechanism of empathy, right? Yeah. So if you're hurting, I can empathize with you. I have theory of mind. I could put myself in your shoes and feel what you're feeling. And it is a fundamentally important part of human sociality to have empathy. So the book is not an attack on empathy in all of its form. It's an attack on the misfiring of empathy. When empathy is targeted to the wrong individuals, or empathy is hyperactive, then we have problems. And so let me here draw a theoretical analogy. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is a psychiatric disorder, but actually its foundation is perfectly adaptive. Let me explain. the idea of scanning the environment for threats makes evolutionary sense. So for example, if you, when I came here, if you had sneezed in your hand and I see that you have a cold and then you shake my hand, I might decide to very quietly go to the bathroom and wash my hands because I don't want to catch your cold. So at that point, that germ contamination fear makes perfect evolutionary and adaptive sense. If, on the other hand, that instinct misfires in the way that I spend every day 7 hours washing my hands in scalding hot water, I can't get to work because I'm stuck in this infinite loop. My skin is falling off because I'm stuck in this infinite loop in scalding hot water. Then it becomes a dysregulated dysfunction, right?
Yeah.
So I take that principle and I argue that our emotional system can exactly exhibit those misfirings. Empathy is great. It's not so great when we care about the illegal Guatemalan immigrants more than the American vets who lost their legs fighting in this war.
It's kind of, in psychology, I mean, there's like the concept of boundaries. It's like you speak to some people and they're like, oh, I want to be so nice to this person, but that person's abusing them. It's like, just stop trying to, that's suicidal empathy effectively.
Exactly.
Like stop sacrificing yourself, at the expense of for someone else. I know you discussed it in your previous book a lot about mating. And specifically in the 7th chapter, you talk a lot about how biology has influenced mating. I recently did a podcast where I basically said, there's obviously a lot of discussion in the Orthodox community where there's a big push for people to get married young. And when people aren't married, naturally there are going to be some people that aren't married. It's a whole big deal, and it became this whole, they refer to it as a crisis, which I've pushed back on personally. I'm like, no, some people don't get married, sorry.
Right.
Like, not right away.
Sure.
Some people don't get married ever, actually, but just because someone's not married by 26, it doesn't mean we're in a crisis. Anyways, so I was saying, I think one of the reasons why people don't get married is because people don't look at dating as a negotiation. They don't know where they stand on what I refer to as the chessboard, And I was reading in chapter 7, and you spoke about this. I believe it was 7 or 8.
Now, which book are you referring to? Because I've spoken.
You spoke about it in the
Consuming
in
Instinct. Consuming Instinct.
Yes, I believe.
Or the evolution. I mean, because so I'm trying to think. I mean, in several books I've talked about.
Yes.
So what's the exact question so I could focus on?
No, I want to, from your perspective, from an evolutionary perspective, psychological perspective, how do you see, like, if you're looking for someone, right?
Yes.
Based on the laws of nature and evolution, how would you see the best way to find someone?
Probably the singular topic that's been most studied by evolutionary psychologists are human mating preferences. And the pioneer of that area is someone who's a good friend of mine, who wrote the foreword to one of my earlier books. That's why I was wondering if that's what you're referring to. So one of my 2011 book titled The Consuming Instinct, What Juicy Burgers, Ferraris, Pornography, and Gift-Giving Reveal About Human Nature. So the foreword to that book was written by David Buss, B-U-S-S, who's a professor of psychology at University of Texas, Austin. And so he conducted the seminal studies, and many have conducted more studies since, in the late 80s, where he collected data from around the world, radically different societies, different cultures, to see if there were certain attributes that are exactly the same in terms of what women look for in men and what men look for in women. And perhaps not surprising, there are unbelievable similarities across grossly different cultures.
Right.
So it's not culture specific.
Right.
What are some of these? Men are much more likely to place a greater premium on a mate's youth and beauty, and women are much more likely to place a much greater premium on a man's status. Now, status could be judged differently as a function of which culture I'm from.
Right.
So if I'm in the Hadza tribe in Africa, it might be the number of cattle head I have. If I am in North America, it might be the number of Ivy Leagues I have, Ivy League degrees I have, or the number of zeros in my bank account. Yeah. So the means by which a culture defines status might change, but there is no culture where women have said the following sentence. You ready? I'm looking for a pear-shaped, nasal-voiced, effeminate man who plays video games all day and shows zero ambition, that drives me into a sexual frenzy. That statement has never been uttered in the history of humanity for a reason.
That's fascinating. That's a great way of putting it. Your humor is awesome. Couple quick rapid fire questions.
Go.
Well, this is unfortunately I need to ask this because of this pod. Your parents are religious?
So we come from an Orthodox community, but not Orthodox in the sense that we have the whole Lubavitch thing, but our synagogue and growing up in Lebanon was an Orthodox community. Here it's called the Spanish Portuguese. So technically we're Orthodox. But am I today? No. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, no, I mean specifically, like I know you talk about God, you're not sure, you're
Yes.
officially atheist. I don't know exactly what your current position is.
So it depends how we define God. If we define God that he really cares whether I eat prosciutto, then that is a demeaning image in my mind of what God should be. The God of the universe should really not care too much whether I have a prosciutto sandwich.
Right.
It really minimizes how important he is if he cares about prosciutto. So then by that measure, then I'm godless.
Yeah.
If we redefine what God means in more sort of esoteric, vague terms, then I can sign up for it. Am I very Jewish in my identity? I was almost executed for being Jewish, so I'm probably more Jewish than most people alive. So I can be very Jewish without necessarily worrying that if I don't light the Shabbat candles at 4:22, not 4:23, because then that's really a problem.
Should come to my house for Shabbat because you'll see me light those at 4:22. I was specifically wanted to ask you though, what's your relationship like with your parents' family based on your direction? You're obviously extremely accomplished, as goes without saying. So I asked that partially because of my own world. And you also mentioned in the book that, some of the dogmatic approaches, and as in your family, as I don't know if you're referring to immediate or extended.
Yeah, you're talking as the dogma is relating to religion.
Yeah, you talk about, I believe in the beginning of the book, you were referring to this.
So what you're talking about there is, I tell the story of, going to the synagogue in Beirut was called Magen Avraham. So we would go to synagogue. And I'm an inquisitive kid, as I am today. And so I would ask my dad, why are we standing up? Why are we sitting down?
Yeah.
Why are we doing the Macarena dance to the left and to the right? And the answer is, shut up and do.
Right.
And that offended me. That upset me. I was a honey badger back then also as a 5-year-old and combative and so on. And so that made me get turned off by this kind of zombified, parasitized, ritualistic thing, right? Now, I can sit down with a rabbi, as I have when I was, say, a doctoral student at Cornell. I became very good friends with a hardcore Orthodox rabbi called Rabbi Eli Silberstein. We're still friends today, where we can have really wonderful philosophical conversations. He's engaging my mind, right?
I was going to ask you, do you ever learn Talmud in a real deep way?
Not in a deep way, in a very, very shallow way.
You would soak it up.
I'm sure I would.
Sorry for
No.
I'm just thinking about it, especially with the way your mind works.
But,
I have friends, by the way, that went straight to Harvard, got their BTL, went straight to Harvard, and these guys sit and learn Talmud all day. It's a bachelor's in Talmudic law, and these guys are the top guys in their class.
I believe
their brains are, their analytical skills. I grew up very much in this world.
Absolutely.
If it doesn't go a straight line, there's no making things up. It has to equal out. If it doesn't equal out.
Just for you, to sort of support what you're saying, in my first book ever, in 2007, I wrote a book. It's a very technical book called The Evolutionary Basis of Consumption. Mm-hmm. I quote Maimonides, who, probably your audience knows who that is, but he was a physician. He was the physician to the Sultan at the time. He was a rabbi. He's a philosopher. And he had proposed that there are 8 levels of tzedakah, right? Like pious
giving
and so on.
Charity, yeah.
And so and what I wanted to demonstrate is that even though he wasn't officially by title an evolutionary psychologist, he was an evolutionary psychologist.
Go on.
Yeah. Why? Because he argued that there are 8 levels of piety in giving, the highest of which is almost never attained, is when the recipient of the altruistic act and the altruist don't know of each other's identity, because there is no social capital to be gained. If I'm doing the act for no other reason than the purity of the act, and I stand to not benefit any social capital from anyone because it's completely anonymous both ways, that's really pure. And so I had taken that to demonstrate that even though you may not be a Darwinist by training, we are all Darwinian beings. And here is Maimonides, to your point, who was an evolutionary psychologist.
So interesting. That's fascinating. Okay, last thing.
Sure.
I'm debating between my last question because it's tough.
Go.
First of all, as a scientist,
Ask both.
I appreciate the hell out of it.
Oh.
As a scientist, what are your thoughts on, Fauci and his handling of COVID? And I ask this because I know that you talk about the stupidity of certain anti-vaxxers.
Right. Yes.
So,
So this idea of settled science is the epitome of a non-scientist. There is no such thing as settled science in science. There are provisional truths, right? So today we may hold something to be true until someone comes along and they may or may not topple it and falsify it. That's what Karl Popper referred to as the falsification principle. We set up a theory and then everybody comes with their weaponry trying to shoot it down. And if it's still standing, then it looks like it is true. But it is always provisionally true. So there are many intelligent people who propose things that were true 300 years ago that today we know are not true. So what I regret in Fauci's position and all those sort of COVID guys is that they created a world that was no different than the Dark Ages. Don't say that or we will burn you at the stake. Don't say that the sun doesn't revolve around the earth, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? That's what happened with Galileo, right? The church put him under house arrest because he was proposing a cosmic theory where the earth wasn't at the center of the universe, right? Well, that was against the church doctrines, and we can't have that. So we're going to either put you under house arrest because you're Galileo, but if you weren't Galileo, we're going to burn you at the stake. Well, Fauci did the exact same reflex, right? So I'll give you a great example. I mentioned earlier Matt Ridley, the evolutionary biologist. His people had written to me. By the way, he was in the House of Lords. He was a lord in the British Parliament. His people had written to me to tell me that his latest book, arguing about the likelihood that the COVID virus had escaped from a Chinese lab, that book was coming out. And it was at the time when you weren't allowed to say that. So I wrote back to them and I said, look, you know that I'm a honey badger and there is nothing that I won't be willing to say. But we need to be non-reckless in our martyr behavior. If we have that conversation and I post it on YouTube, within 3 seconds of me posting it, it will be removed and likely my channel closed.
Right.
So it'll serve us zero purpose.
Right.
And that decision, and they understood it, but that decision always sat bad with me.
But it's not, because you would have
done
the time.
Exactly. I'm jumping just to get killed, just to prove that I'm a hero. But so to answer your question, what I hate about Fauci and all his gangs is that they didn't allow all ideas to be, adjudicated in the arena of, ideas. Now, here is the great cosmic justice and the great irony. Jay Bhattacharya, do you know who that is?
No.
He is one of the guys. He's a physician by training and a health economist at Stanford. With 2 other guys, he wrote the I think it was called the Barrington Declaration. I can't remember what it was, where he was arguing that many of the positions that we've taken as relating to COVID were ill thought.
Yeah.
And they wanted to fire him from Stanford. He was just nominated by Trump to head the NIH.
But also, there's what just came out is the clear emails of Fauci literally saying, like, shut this guy down, like, without even a look.
That guy should be, I know he probably
should go to prison.
He should be in prison for the rest of his life.
It's crazy. It's unbelievable. And I just saw another story of, the woman who accused the 3 Duke players,
she should
of rape.
go.
What should be the punishment for someone like?
So whatever the punishment would have been for them had they been found guilty, that's what she should get. So if it's 30 years, you go 30 years. What's one of the 10 commandments? Do not bear false witness.
Yes.
Right? So you're bearing false witness. And even if those guys didn't go to prison, which they didn't, right? It was dismissed.
Yeah, in that case. Yeah.
That stain is never going to be washed away.
Trevor Bauer from, I don't know if you're familiar with that story.
No.
Same thing. He was accused of, I believe, of sexual assault on the Astros. Big time pitching career ahead of him. He was like the ace. He was like one of the big guys.
I know this guy.
And his girlfriend, wife, accused him. Story totally false.
He did go to prison, right?
They kicked him off the team.
Oh.
And then it was found out. Total lie. But his career's over. It's just insane. Last question.
Yes, sir.
Who's the most... I know you're close with Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
I want your thoughts on him, as well as who's been the most inspirational thinker
in my life, all time?
Yeah.
Well, I love Jordan. He's a great guy. I don't share some of his reverence for Carl Jung. He does all the Jungian stuff.
Yeah.
It's a bit of hocus pocus for me. That's one. I'm not as religiously inclined as he is, but otherwise he's a lovely human being, a very sharp guy. So I have only good things to say about him. Who is the greatest thinker that's influenced me the most? I'll answer that in two ways. At the most fundamental level, it has to be Charles Darwin, because I'm taking the theory of evolution and applying it to the study of the human mind. In a more temporally close thing, it's a book that launched my career as an evolutionary behavioral scientist. It was my first semester as a doctoral student, where I was taking an advanced social psychology course, and the professor, his name is Dennis Regan, about halfway through the semester assigned a book by actually two Canadian-based evolutionary psychologists, husband and wife team, called Margot Wilson and Martin Daly. The book was titled Homicide, and it explored patterns of criminality via an evolutionary lens. And in a very, very elegant way, with great theoretical parsimony, they were able to explain a bewildering number of universal patterns of crimes. That was my aha moment. I said, okay, well, I'm going to take that evolutionary framework and apply it to study human behavior in general and consumer and economic behavior in particular.
Unbelievable. I love this book. I'm so excited, guys. I mean, it's coming out. I thought it was going to be coming out in like the next 6 months.
I'm working on it.
First of all, I'm not joking. Anyone who's watching this, I know they're part of from my ilk type of thing. Like, Parasitic Mind. You're not going to be disappointed. This is a great Shabbat read. If you're sitting around and you just ate a whole bunch of cholent and you're hungry, By the way, I went on the lion diet. That's a whole different discussion. You familiar with that? The meat diet?
No. The meat diet?
Yeah, it's the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
So
Jordan
talks about it. So I have an autoimmune disease, so I went on it, whatever.
And it's helping you?
So far, I feel great.
Oh, good.
I haven't been on for that long, but so far, I feel great. Either way, maybe you'll hear me scream from New York soon, but you'll know it's not so great. Anyways, guys, this is a must-buy. First of all, Saad on X.
At GADSAAD.
He hit the 1 million follower mark.
I hit the 1 million followers. I did.
And if you want to just crack up consistently, the best Twitter feed, Suicidal Empathy, coming out shortly. Elon Musk is busy retweeting you every single day. I mean,
Elon Musk is my biggest fan.
He loves you. He really does. No, because
I love him back. Because
you're able to pinpoint with absolute perfect accuracy all the things that drive him insane. I mean, obviously, he has his own personal, situations. Yeah. Anyways, Dr. Saad, thank you so much.
Thank you so honored to be here. From New York.
Absolutely. I'm on my way back in a couple hours. Guys, another amazing episode coming next week. I hope you all enjoyed this one. Peace.